Good evening, fellow Americans. I had hoped when I became president I would not have to do this again. Another massacre, Uvalde, Texas, an elementary school. Beautiful, innocent, second, third, fourth graders. And how many scores of little children who witness what happened see their friends die as if they're on a battlefield, for God's sake. They'll live with it the rest of their lives. There's a lot we don't know yet. There's a lot we do know. The parents who will never see their child again, never have them jump in bed and cuddle with them. Parents who will never be the same. To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away. There's a hollowness in your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it and never going to be able to get out. Suffocating. And it's never quite the same. So tonight, I ask the nation to pray for them, give the parents and siblings the strength in the darkness they feel right now. As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? I am sick and tired of it. We have to act. And don't tell me we can't have an impact on this carnage.
One to me that stands out, we've been talking about this quite a bit with the gun debate, 98% of public mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. Seems to me that's pretty cut and dry, one that's never talked about. In your opinion, when does it cross that barrier where, okay, we can definitively say this is the reason?
Well, I think for gun control people, it will never cross that barrier because they will never discuss it in those terms. When did you ever see any gun control advocate come up with numbers to show that gun control reduces murders? There's a huge volume of evidence out there. Think of it. There are 50 states, each having all kinds of different gun laws. There are all kinds of ways they could be compared. Think of all the countries around the world with different gun laws, different periods of history when there were different gun laws. And so you have a mountain of evidence if you were looking for evidence. Instead, they just simply assume from day one that if you have tighter gun laws, you'll have less murder rates. And there's tons of empirical evidence pointing just in the opposite direction.
So to gun owners out there who say, well, a Biden administration means they're going to come for my guns.
Bingo. You're right if you have an assault weapon. The fact of the matter is they should be illegal, period.
The more groupthink that's being promoted. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that Americans need to be educated on why the founders of our nation gave us the Second Amendment in the first place. And they gave us the Second Amendment not to do duck hunting and not to do deer hunting and to protect our houses. They explicitly said they want us to have arms to protect ourselves against abuse of government.
And see, what you just said is true, factually, historically true, and yet it's crazy to the left and to the media.
That is absolutely right. But even another question about the gun control in terms of reducing the crime, you have to keep in mind that guns are inanimate objects. One can put a gun right here, and it can be there for a century, and it's not going to do anything. Now, the people who are arguing for gun control as a way to reduce the slaughter that we see in the United States, they're kind of saying with cars, like 30 people are killed each day by drunk drivers in our country. So what do? You want to have car control, or it turns out that that rifles kill roughly people. Rifles and shotguns are used to kill about 550 people each year, according to FBI statistics. But in terms of knives are responsible for about 1,500 deaths a year. So what do you want? Knife control? I mean, if you use the same reasoning that people use about guns to cars and knives, you'd have background checks in order for you to go buy a knife, or background checks for you to buy a car. I think what we fail to realize is that what has happened to our society in terms of morality, and keep in mind that today it's more difficult to get a gun or a rifle than it has ever been in our country.
150 million people have been killed since 2007, when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. More than all the wars, including Vietnam.
Rummaging through numbers can turn up statistical data consistent with a given vision, and rummaging through other numbers, or perhaps even the same numbers viewed or selected differently, can produce data consistent with the opposite vision. But only when numbers are in accord with the prevailing vision are they likely to be accepted uncritically, without considering other statistics that tell a very different story. For example, much of what is said about the effect of gun control on crime rates in general, or on the murder rate in particular, is based on what kinds of statistics are repeated endlessly and what kinds of data seldom, if ever, reach the general public.
If you look in the Sears and Roebuck catalog of 1908, there are 35 pages of sales of guns, and what you do with the Sears catalog, you send your money and they send you out a gun. Or you can walk in the hardware store and buy a gun. Or for a long time, a birthday present for a 12-year-old or 14-year-old from his father was a .22 rifle. Schools had gun shooting clubs. And so you might say, what has happened to guns between 1920 and today? What are guns doing differently? Well, guns aren't doing anything differently. You have to ask the question, what has happened to people since the 1920s? And what there's been a decline in morality. And so this is what you find happening all over our country. And to say that we want gun control in order to protect our kids in the schools, that's just plain nonsense.
And yet it's being pushed. It's almost monopolizing the debate. And then I have to shut it off. I see guests who come on who have a different point of view, and they're shut down. I see at least one cable channel, CNN, had this event the other night with Marco Rubio and others who were shouted down because they don't go full gun control. The host used to work for one of the handgun control organizations. I was never told. Yeah. You know, whether it's climate change or abortion, gun control, it seems to me we're always debating on the grounds and the terms set by the left. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
I think it's very popular. I think that the left is very, very effective at selling their point of view to the American people than the right or libertarians or conservatives. That is, we're not as good with messaging as the left. The left appears so caring. And whereby the right does not appear as caring. And so what we have to do, we have to be able to sell the moral superiority of personal liberty and just morality in general. We have to do a better job of doing that.
Do you think there's enough of us left who are willing to do it? I don't see a lot of them in Congress, I can tell you that.
You don't see a lot of them on college campuses either.